individuals are more and more interested in their genetic information. You can go to, the gas station or a fast food restaurant and hear people talking about their results from DTC consumers or from the doctor. What I'm most concerned about is that we do protect privacy, but at the same time that this information is available to use for research, particularly as you're getting the kind of porosity that we're seeing at a place like Kaiser and others, where clinical and research integration is really happening rapidly, and that's very important. And so I've developed a system that I've worked on for years and have a partner called Luna DNA, whereby we allow individuals to keep a string on their data. So they deposit their genome, their medical record, their patient-reported outcomes, and they get to tell who gets access to this information. And the data stays in the repository in multiple databases with lots of foreign key structures, et cetera. And the questions come to that data. So sandboxes, virtual compute environments allow these questions to be asked and even spin up whole communities around the questions. For me, trying to drive a consumer-driven healthcare system like we have now done in ride sharing and music and other places, I think we're going to need to see an integration of these systems such that the consumer is central, the focus, and in fact gets rewarded. So in our system, we have SEC qualified shares given to individuals for sharing their information, and that means we're overseen by the SEC, and that gives us another level of accountability and really moving people from being subjects or patients to being partners.
If I'm an academic and I do a study, and I'm at a university, I'm doing something that's federally funded, I got to go through an independent review board that says, well, did you get the proper permission? Is there some risk here? Is what you're doing likely to be helpful? Is it going to harm the people who are part of the experiment? But what if I'm a company and I'm doing that same research? Or I'm an academic and I'm working with corporate data and it's not a federally funded project? I don't have that same review process. We need those done in a credible way so that we can rely that these sorts of things get vetted.
How do we apply that in genomic data of 3.5 billion records? Do I selectively, de-identify within it? And that's where the research is. Can we selectively do things? 0.5% of unique identification within the DNA, right? Mm-hmm. The majority of it is shared. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about that, DNA is humanity. I mean, I'm philosophical now. So in a way, yes, there's some very unique pieces to the data, but in my view, only when combined with other identifiers and context, and then we have to play that all out and think about it, well, how do we apply it from a pragmatic standpoint in terms of security and controls, and clearly de-identification and cryptography is going to be a key part of that. So anyway.
First of all, 5% of a very large number is still a very large number.
Sure.
So we have to acknowledge that. And we've actually all heard stories, feel-good stories actually, where somebody who did not submit knowingly their genetic information was actually identified because someone else freely shared their information, and that allowed someone, an investigator, to triangulate on an individual. Mm-hmm. And you can pretty easily see scenarios where someone is very interested in finding someone who doesn't want to be found.
I think there's also nefarious use of data happening already. We've seen that especially in medical record breaks, but also in genomic information. And I'm very concerned, not so much maybe about an individual, but that individual's genome actually is a representation of their family, their ancestors, their children. So right. When I share my genome, I maybe should be asking my parents and my children for permission. I don't, but I could.
There are a lot of very technically interesting solutions that are things like, oh, here's a way in which you can use powerful cryptography in such a way that an insurance company, for example, can query your doctor's database, not learn any of the plain text information about your DNA, but nonetheless be able to compute what it is they want to compute. For example, it might be things like how to set your insurance pricing, again, in a potentially discriminatory way. Now, what have we done here? This is a very cool technology, but it doesn't actually address the concern that people have. It actually enables the very thing that they're worried about, which is discriminatory pricing using your genetic information, right? So I wanted to just give that note of caution. When people say privacy, they often mean fairness, and so we should take that into account. And cryptography is very powerful, but only if we use it in the right way.
It's going to be a wild ride because these issues are messy. And guess what? We haven't figured them out in the rest of life. There's no way we're going to solve them easily online. We haven't figured out the balance of free speech. We haven't figured out what is and what isn't the right discrimination. When am I discriminating in a positive way? When is it a negative way? Who gets protected? When is it relevant to treat people differently? When is it economic? We haven't solved these problems elsewhere. It's messy. It's different in every country. It's going to be messy and uncomfortable and hard, but we have no choice. And if you're an optimist like I am about what can be done with tech and data, hang on for the ride.